Right now, we got one of you with one thumbs up already. That's so awesome to see already here in the live stream. When you come into the live stream, be sure and hit the like button when you come in. It will grab the video and send it around for more people to join in and help out with the discussion. So today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about the gold standard and protecting yourself with gold. Now, I have been a strong dollar theorist for a long time, and it's not because I think that the Federal Reserve is awesome, or I think that the dollar is good, or anything like that, or that the system is good. It's none of that stuff. It doesn't have any reason to do with any of that stuff. It just comes down to the way the system has grown to the position that it's in, and what's going to happen with the dollar once it really does start to lose its world reserve currency status. Now, when we think about like gold for protection, there is really no other way to get out of that third-party claim. Everything else in your life, I mean, maybe not your life personally because you figured it out, but for most people, when it comes to protecting their wealth, there is very few places that they know where to go to try and park that money. Like most of the time, they're thinking of stock investments or real estate or bonds or something that is going to end up returning back in dollars, like it's dollar denominated assets. Gold, silver, copper, these are the few items that are outside of that third party claim. You don't have to worry about somebody's like promise to pay you, or a bond paying, or stock price going up, or devaluing of the currency. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff at all. Really, the only thing you have to worry about is being able to protect that gold. Now, when you think about gold being like a store of value for the last 5,000 years, it really doesn't have anything else that can substitute for its place. I mean, it's just really that one possession that is more outstanding than anything else out there. I got Patrick texting me. I'll give him a call here in a little bit. Now, one of the things that I kind of wanted to bring up was the talking about the debasement of currency, right? Now, this is one of the reasons why a lot of people are looking at the dollar as, man, do not participate in this dollar thing. What you have is a debasing of the currency that has taken place. It's going to destroy your purchasing power. That's one of the reasons why you would want to be into gold. Now, that little scenario right there is so obvious to people, right? You got the money flowing through the system, you got inflation running rampant, and gold is the one place that you can go to protect yourself. And I totally would agree with that when it comes to the inflation scenario, but I don't necessarily agree with it being the protection from an inflationary scenario from the dollar destruction, because I don't feel that that's what's going to happen. If the dollar was going to be favored and everybody looked at it as, man, this is so awesome for liquidity, and everybody wants to do their transactions in it, then it would be a much different story. I would not feel that the dollar was going to get stronger. I would feel that it was going to get weaker. The demand for liquidity inside of dollars, right? Like the ability to transact in dollars is really what drove the demand for the liabilities out of the Federal Reserve, which caused all the printing to take place. Now, I know that might be a little confusing for a lot of people out there, but really that's what it comes down to, is the demand for the Fed's liabilities. And that is the demand for liquidity. That is the demand for people to be able to do transactions with each other. And that's where the dollar really served its purpose. See, when we were on a gold standard, which is true that it would produce a lot more stable prices, as far as you wouldn't see these fluctuation in prices or the debasement of the currency like you do today, which would, a lot of times gets equated into the prices. When we had a gold standard, it was very stable, right? Prices didn't fluctuate that much. However, what a lot of times when you hear about people talking about this gold standard being a better position to be in or a better system to be in, they don't really bring up the fact that there is a concentration of wealth that takes place with the gold standard. And it may take years. Like you might set up a system, or the system might be set up in such a way that the gold standard exists, right? But what would end up happening is the most industrious nation would end up with all the gold. And that's how the United States ended up with all the gold. So as far as a gold standard goes, I don't really necessarily believe that a gold standard would be beneficial to just about anybody out there. In fact, I don't think it would be beneficial to anybody at all, except for the most industrious nations out there. However, for an individual purpose, for as an individual possession, I think by holding gold or silver or even copper to a lesser extent is by far the greatest position that you could ever be in to protect yourself from that third-party claim that's going on out there. So when we think about this, when we think about like what it is that is taking place when you have like, say, the story of like BRICS setting up a gold standard or a gold-backed currency or something like that. If you really take into consideration what that would look like and what would happen to the economy if there was a gold standard currency, like a gold-backed currency or something. So let's think about that for just a little bit. If you had two currencies in the system, right, they would end up being competing currencies. Like they don't work together, right? You got the BRICS nations coming in with the gold standard, and then you got the almighty dollar out there, like encompassing the entire world, doing all the world trade, right? So you got gold standard, which is, or a gold-backed currency, which is far better than the dollar is out there. So how many people would be willing to participate in the releasing of their gold as opposed to the releasing of paper? Right? I mean, just it doesn't matter what you're talking about. The idea that somebody is going to be like, yeah, I think I'll hold on to the paper dollars, or just better yet, I would just rather just use gold instead, regardless if I have paper dollars. Now, if you have the opportunity to say, hold on to gold or acquire paper dollars in order to do the transactions, people would still hold on to the gold, right? No matter how you look at it, people would much rather hold on to the gold than to try and hold on to the paper currency. So no matter how you look at that, the paper currency is going to be the one that's in the economy, as the gold would get hoarded and stocked away, right? So now, if you think, okay, what would it be like if there was a gold standard in play and it wasn't being hoarded but actually being used? Is that, again, what you're going to find is that the most industrious nation out there who can export the most stuff will import all the gold, and eventually they will have a concentration of gold, and they're not going to want to give it up. And the reason why they won't want to give it up is because once you have acquired all the gold, you start increasing your standard of living. The moment that you start giving up that gold, you're going to fall into poverty. So this is one of the problems that starts to come up when you have a gold standard, or the idea that a gold standard or a gold-backed currency would be introduced into the system, is that it would have to compete with what is already out there. See, now the dollar was able to take over as the world reserve currency, replacing gold, because there was a time in which people saw it as one-to-one, right? They had a fixed amount of gold to set to the dollars, right? What was it, $22 or whatever it was? So basically $20 an ounce, and then they moved that up to $35 an ounce. But still, during that time, it was a fixed amount. So people knew that if they had a certain amount of dollars, they essentially had a certain amount of gold, right? And so this wasn't competing. This was working in conjunction with each other. They were working like a symbiotic relationship, right? The world was like, man, we love these dollars. Look at all the transactions we can do. This liquidity is so awesome. Please give us more, right? And so like the Federal Reserve in the United States was like, yeah, sure, no problem. Here, we'll dump out a bunch of debt and issue out a bunch of currency. And the only way to really get this out to the rest of the world is by buying a bunch of stuff, right? So you import a bunch of stuff and you export a bunch of dollars. And the world just thought this was great because they thought essentially they were getting gold when really they were getting dollars. Once they figured it out, the whole thing started to collapse. Right? So again, how is the gold standard going to work? Because that little scenario that the United States was in is going to be the same thing that starts taking place in whatever nation is the most industrious one out there. So again, what did the United States do? They were like, well, we're not giving up our gold, and we're going to have to just kind of sever the gold standard, and we just going to do the whole paper currency thing, and we promise we just won't print too much. Right? So now we're come to the conclusion that they've printed far too much. That's the question that I start to wonder about. It's just like, how much did they really print comparatively to how much demand there really is for dollars out there? How much dollar denominated debt really exists within the system that is going to require those dollars to get out of that debt? That's the big question. See, they asked Jerome Powell long before he started the printing press up, before the Federal Reserve or quantitative easing. They asked him, how much money do you plan on printing, or does the Federal Reserve plan on expanding the balance sheet to? And he said that depends on how much demand for our liabilities there are. And that's a very interesting thing to think about, because it's not something that a lot of people even bring up. How much demand for the Fed's liabilities there are. See, here in the United States, we don't really look at it like that, but outside of the United States, there's a huge demand for dollars. Nations like Argentina and Buenos Aires and I don't know, you could probably just name them off one right after the other. But these are nations that use dollars in their daily transactions. Like, the dollar is their currency. Now, they do have their local currency, but everybody loves the dollar because it's so much more stable. That occurs even today. And a lot of people here in the United States, when we think about the inflation scenario that we have experienced, and we think about how the dollar is trash, we don't think about how much demand there is outside of the United States for it. Just to simply do transactions within another nation, these people would much prefer to use dollars as opposed to their local currencies. But then it goes much deeper than that, because you think about all the contracts that are written in dollars, the dollar denominated debt that's written by corporations, by sovereign nations, by just individual people looking to just to do deals using the dollar. There is a huge demand for the dollars outside of the United States. And now I think about what the Federal Reserve is up to, because, man, I'm really rambling. Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to get a bunch of information out so we can talk here. But I think about what the Federal Reserve is doing, because they were trying to meet that demand, right? Increase the liabilities until they can meet that demand out there for it.
I got a question for you.
Hold on, guys. I got somebody approaching. Yeah, man.
I'm broke down and my truck's broke down, and somebody dropped me off at the liquor store, and I just want to know how far until Safeway.
Oh, dude, you're almost to Safeway. Yeah, you're almost there, man. You only got maybe another 10-minute walk. Yeah, just down that walk, man.
Down that way, keep going.
Yep, you're about 10 minutes, bro. You too. So anyway, I think about the Federal Reserve and the demand for these liabilities, right? So here they are, they're trying to meet the demand. Now, if you are going to continue on printing to meet the demand, you are eventually going to destroy yourself, right? I mean, eventually you just, debase the currency until it's eventually gone. However, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with the fact that you have this demand for your liabilities out there, other than printing up the money and fulfilling that demand? How else do you deal with it, other than you try to lower the demand? And that's one of the reasons why I feel that all this talk about BRICS nations, moving out and away from the dollar is pretty much a psyops game, right? It's an attempt to try and get the people out of the dollar, to quit demanding the dollar, to lower that demand so that the Federal Reserve can meet those expectations. I mean, that's not something that a lot of people would bring up, but it really seems to be the case. At least for me, in the way I'm seeing it, because when people are saying, man, they're going to totally ditch the dollar, I'm like, they can. That's Triffin's dilemma doesn't really allow for just the dumping of the dollar and moving into another currency. Like, even if you were to move into another currency like the yuan, right? China's going to face a problem with that, because what ends up happening is that if you start moving into a yuan, like world currency or something like that, there's going to be demand for that yuan. And how does China provide that yuan to the world, right? The way the United States did it is they went into massive deficit trade, right? Or trade deficits, where we started importing a hell of a lot more than we export. Well, China gets their new money in from exports, right? So they're not trying to import stuff so they can export yuan. They're trying to export stuff so they can bring in money, right? And now I don't think they really care where the money comes from or what kind of money it is, so long as that they can use that money to buy other stuff, right? So that money is strong. And what's strong is the dollar, not the yuan. So now when you got China exporting stuff and bringing in dollars, that strengthens them. That gives them the ability to raise their standard of living. But now, if they were to try and export debt, like bonds, like the United States is, now they're in competition with the United States. And who do you trust more? Like, really, I mean, you can't really trust the United States, but who would you trust more? Right? Would you trust China to pay their debts, or would you trust the United States to pay their debts? I mean, most of the time, I mean, it was just like, well, I don't really like this. I like this answer, but yeah, it's going to be the United States, right? Because that's the case for it. So there's no way that like the yuan is going to step up, or that China would even allow the yuan to step up, because the moment it starts to strengthen, then they're going to have issues with their exports. The stronger the yuan gets, the harder it is to export their stuff to those other nations. So I just don't see where China would want like the yuan to be anywhere close to a world reserve currency, just for the simple fact that they get their new money in from exporting their manufactured goods, and that would be completely opposite if it went the other way around. So, all right, I've babbled on enough. Let's continue. All right. How much gold do you have? I don't really like answering that question. All right. Let's go up to the top here. Woohoo, first comment, you love, yeah, bud. All right, love you, bud. Cool, Southwest off the grid, nice to see you. All right, oh, a new truck. Not really a new truck. It's a very old truck. It's a 99 Ford Explorer, but my parents got a new vehicle, and so they had this one just kind of, they had it around for if they needed to haul something or whatever. But they really didn't need the vehicle anymore, and so they were like, hey, you want it? And I said, yes, I do. So yeah, so I'm driving around in a 99 Ford Explorer, and I kid you not, the back seats don't ever look like they even been sat in. So. All right, yeah, Jeff Snyder just wrapping up his webinar. Yeah, I gotta go and check out some Jeff Snyder stuff. A Ranger, nice. Nope, Ford Explorer. But pretty close to a Ranger. It really looks like a lot like my old Ford Ranger, my 95. I love your approach of educating many. You don't sugarcoat things, which I love. Keep up the great work. Yeah, well, thank you very much. Flipside Garage, I really appreciate that, man. Like, I could come out here and try, because I mean, I found myself actually doing that at one point, and then I realized right away, well, I didn't realize right away, but it took me, I realized that I was like looking at the videos or thinking of videos that I thought people would want to see. And that isn't what I do, right? That's not what, I mean, if I was putting out videos that I think you want to see, then I know that you're probably not going to want to watch them. The videos that I put out that I know are the best ones are the ones that are, I'm just letting them flow out. And I don't try to put it in a way that is going to be like acceptable for everybody, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. Like, some people are going to get upset about, something that I say because they have this certain belief in mind. And when I come off with like, some strong dollar theory talk or something like that, it really triggers them in their ideas of what they had. I mean, if that happens, it happens, but I'm not going to try and put out a video that says, hey, I'm going to make sure that, the people who are following me are going to be happy with my video that I do. That's like, I can't do it like that. I got to put out the information in a way that I feel is like genuine and true from the information that I find, And so if it's upsetting, it can be, I guess. I don't know. All right. Scott, what are you trying to get at, man? All right. Hit the like and show Simon your appreciation. Thank you, all-nighter. I like Chevys because they're big and bold, but I like the reliability of a Ford. Okay. Oh, that's enough Scots. Okay. How high could gold possibly get? Well, deja vu, that's like, who knows? I mean, if there was a complete crash of the entire debt market system, the financial markets completely collapsed, that would see like sovereign currencies going, you would see all kinds of stuff start to fail. Pretty much everything that was a third-party promise would collapse, right? So gold would go to extreme highs. In fact, hold on. How much would gold be? Let's find out what Cantillon says. I was reading about this earlier. Let me see if I can find it real quick. All right. The consent of mankind has given its value to gold and silver. This cannot be doubted, since absolute necessity had no share in it. It is the same consent that has given and does give every day a value to lace, linen, fine cloths, copper, and other metals. Man could subsist without any of these things, but it must be concluded that they have only an imaginary value. They have a value proportional to the land and labor that enter into their production. Gold and silver, like other goods and food products, can only be produced at a cost roughly proportional to the value set upon them. And whatever man produces by labor, this labor must provide his maintenance. It is the great principle that one hears every day from the mouths of humble classes, who have no part in the speculations, and who live by their labor and their enterprise. Everybody must live. So, really, how high can it go? Well, I guess what is it that is going to be pulling that gold out of the ground, and how much effort does it take to get that gold out of the ground comparatively to what that gold is going to be buying from all the labor and land and efforts of everybody else out there who is producing things. I would imagine a little tiny bit of gold would buy a lot of stuff if you're going to try and compare it, right? So the idea that the amount of work that it takes to pull the gold out of the ground, I don't think is necessarily going to compare to the amount of stuff that is available out there, right? Like, you know, if you put an hour's worth of work into pulling out an ounce of gold, that hour's worth of work isn't going to be the same hour's worth of work, or the, like, you know, trading your ounce of gold over for another hour's worth of work from somebody else. I believe the hour's worth of work pulling that gold out would buy many hours worth of work in other products that are out there. So how far can gold go? Who knows, right? It's a good question though. That's an interesting one. That's one that, like, really can have a lot of circling around in the brain to figure out what it is that could you imagine how much an ounce of gold can buy? Like, you know, you think about how much gold actually exists in the world to how many people exist, and then you divide that gold up amongst all those people, how much gold is available to each individual person, right? I mean, who knows where it could go. Yeah, right on. Hey, dishes every day. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Lumberjack Landlord. Great to see you here, man. Just joined, but can you explain how gold can protect against inflation if its normal price can be manipulated? Well, I guess that would be the case in which that you would have to compare it to the goods and services that are out there. So, protecting yourself from inflation, I'm not sure if it's going to protect you from, like, the price inflation that we would see out there. What it's going to do is protect you from the third-party claim, right? And if we had a gold standard, we would have much stable prices. So as far as, like, protecting you from inflation, I don't think, like, the possession of gold is necessarily going to protect you from inflation. It's never done that for me anyway. But it will protect you from a third-party claim. And if we were to think about a gold standard, then I believe that would protect us from inflation. But as far as an individual and the holding of gold, a lot of people will say this is going to protect you from inflation, from price inflation and stuff like that. I think it can in the long run, but it's not going to be, like, necessarily understood in the sense that, you know, the things that you can buy today with an ounce of gold will continue to buy the same or very close to the same amount throughout your life or throughout history. That's the way it kind of protects you from inflation. But as far as, like, the scenarios that we had experienced here just recently, like, we had inflation run pretty rampant, and gold and silver really didn't move that much. Not like a lot of people would have thought it would. And in fact, a lot of people were trying to get me to like say that it was going to. I was invited on, like, some interviews to, like, you know, pump gold and silver, and I'm like, I'm not gonna do that, you know. Like, I'll tell you, I'll give you my opinion, but I'm not gonna be pumping these things, you know. And anyway, let's see here. Good evening from Lakeland, Florida. Good evening, Kevin. Good to see you here, man. All right, all this talk about economic has me hot. Yeah, all right. Love money. Know what I'm saying? I've got to run for a minute. Everyone be nice. All right, all-nighter. We'll see you in a little bit. Fed Skinwalker? All right, everyone hit the like button. How much gold do you have? Oh, I won't answer that one. I personally have an entire 22 have an entire 22 grams. Holy, is that a beer? No, it's not a beer. I don't drink beer. It's a kombucha that somebody had brought to the store to give to the employees, and I grabbed one before I headed out. It's the Clear Mind from Brew Doctor. Rosemary and mint. Pretty good. All right. Having real things, commodities like lumber, firewood, gold are a way to store value outside of the banking industry. Gold is good because it won't rot or go bad. Hey, Simon from Central California, do you think gold will 10 times, 10x? I mean, what are you thinking? Taking it from like 1,900 to $20,000 or something like that? Is that kind of the idea behind it? I mean, it can happen. I don't see any reason why it couldn't happen. But, just like somebody was saying earlier, the manipulation game inside of it, I don't really play that. Like, I don't think about how much my gold and silver is going to be worth into the future. Like, I mean, there was a time when I did do that. Like, I used to think about, like, I used to get all jazzed by, watching the silver prices move up. But of course, I was buying back in 2009, 10, and then when in 2011 it was running up to $50 an ounce. I mean, I thought I was the smartest person in the world. So I learned my lesson following prices or thinking about like how much this is going to be worth. That's not what benefited me like at all. The only time that silver really did anything for me, it did two things. One is it gave me the ability to sleep at night knowing that I had something. If something was to go wrong, I would have it. That was my insurance policy. I loved having that ability to have that like that assurance. And then the other time it did something for me is when I actually needed it and my car broke down and I used some silver to buy a car. Those were the only two times. Both of it, that's insurance, right? That's the only thing that it's really ever done for me and actually had me feeling good about was using it as an insurance policy. So that's the way I look at it. I don't really think about how much it's going to go up. I really only think about how much I have. Or I don't even really think about that. I really think about like how much can I add to it this month? That's the most important part. Like how much I have or how much it's worth is really doesn't mean as much as how much can I buy this month or how much can I get, this week or next week. All right. Where do you keep your gold? All right. How much gold and silver should we have and what form for when it hits the fan? I think honestly, that's going to be a personal question that you need to figure out for yourself. If you own no gold and no silver at all, then I would suggest going down to the local coin shop or just going online and ordering some. Order some and get it in your hand, because once you have it in your hand, you're going to start looking at things a lot differently. You're going to start, understanding, silver and gold bullion a little differently. You might recognize the government issue as opposed to generic. You will start feeling a little bit differently about your position that you have, and it would start making a lot more sense to you on how much you need and of what kind of silver and gold, of the fraction size. Somebody might be like, hey, I want $100,000 in silver. Well, you probably don't want that in a bunch of like junk silver dimes or something like that. That would be a kind of a mess to deal with. I mean, if you had it all packaged, I guess it wouldn't be. But 10-ounce bars, 100-ounce bars, if you have that much, I mean, that's pretty handy and convenient if you're trying to, move that much of it. Most of the time, I find that 1-ounce silver bullion is by far like the most popular thing out there. And then after that, maybe 10th-ounce gold coins, those ones would be kind of popular as well. You want stuff that you can be able to liquidate quickly. So if it seems like rare to you, then it's going to be rare to somebody else, right? And so if it's rare to somebody, or if it's rare, then it's going to be expensive, right? So you have to have, like, you'll be limited on who you can sell it to. That's why I'm saying is you have to find somebody else who would find it rare too. But if it's just weight bullion, like you don't even care, it's just generic silver bullion pieces, then there's a lot of people who you can deal with, right? There's a lot of people who would be accepting of that and paying like, the just below spot price, or maybe even spot price if you can convince them of that. So being able to liquidate that silver quite quickly, or gold, that's important too. Like a lot of times I heard people say, well, what about like, platinum or palladium or something like that? And whether or not it goes up in price, I mean, that's, I guess, up to you to decide. But how quickly can you get out of that position? Like if you have, 10 platinum coins, I mean, I know somebody who might buy one of them off of me, right? But I can find somebody who's going to buy like all 10 off of me at once. But if you had, $50,000 worth of silver, I mean, well, you could probably sell that in platinum too. But I guess what I'm getting at is that if you had a bunch of silver and you needed to unload it, I mean, you could go down to the local bar, like the tavern, and just like start showing people, hey man, I got this, I got the Silver Eagle. Anybody willing to give me $20 for it or whatever? I mean, that's a little cheap for it, but you know what I mean? It's like you could liquidate that really quickly, and that's something you have to keep in mind, especially if you're using it for end times kind of purpose. All right. Realize it has to be exchanged, and once. 24 years old, almost 25. UE is loading with gold. I wouldn't say, like, I do own some gold, right? I mean, I have some 10,000 gold coins, and I don't know if you guys remember the video, but somebody actually sent me a whole ounce of gold one time. I was so amazed by that. So I do own some gold, but mainly it's silver, right? It's more of a silver position that I've moved into. Alright, I keep it in a van down by the river. That's probably the safest place. Alright, it costs a lot to produce lumber or firewood. How could you expect anyone to go out and make some? UE, your local GPS. Dude, is that a beer? No, we already talked about that. Alright, there's a cool book about the collapse of the USSR, and it's lists commodity items that were valuable for trade and barter when the currency had gone tits up. Yeah. See, now that's another thing. Like a lot of times people don't really think about, like, what it is that you would truly need if things went really bad. Like, a lot of times people are like, well, I'm just going to load up on bullets, right? And then I'll just take whatever I need. Well, then you're in a constant fight, and that's probably not going to end well for you, right? It's more about being sharing skills, right? It's more about a communal effort things, right? Not with everybody, but having a good community yourself. Like if you don't have a particular skill, find somebody who has that skill and figure out what it is that you can trade with them, right? That's the kind of thing that really, in my mind, is a better prepping than trying to load up on a bunch of bullets, right? I mean, having bullets is really important. You got to be able to protect yourself, right? So, I mean, having firearms and protecting yourself in that way is really important. But to use that as your game plan, like this is how I'm going to survive, that's going to be a very tough existence, right? But being in cooperation with other people, you're going to find that it's going to be a whole lot easier to go that route, and pretty much since I started this channel, I've told people, like, if you're going to prepare for anything, prepare to preserve food. Like that is probably going to be the best skill that you can have. Canning supplies, learn to can. Once you have that skill, then you really don't have to stress about like storing massive amounts of food. Like people are like, man, I got a year and a half's worth of food. You don't really need to do that. Like if you have the availability to get food, like the Columbia River's right out here. There's fish all the time out of there. If you can catch 100 pounds of fish, but you don't know what to do with it, well, then it's a waste, right? You can only consume what it is that you have caught just that day, and the rest of it's going to rot. But if you have the skill and the canning, and the canning supplies on hand, my wife can turn 100 pounds of fish into preserved jars that'll last for years, within hours. I mean, literally, she can knock that out in no time at all. And so having that skill is probably one of the most beneficial things that you can ever do for yourself, and just loading up on canning supplies and having the skills to do that. After that, then you can start prepping up on other things, protections, and, I think tools would be another good one to have, because without tools, how are you supposed to build anything or repair anything? So like tools, canning supplies, Those would probably be the top two, in my opinion. Let's see. What won't happen? It's all going down. Someone recently said gold should be $50,000 an ounce based off of how much money there is in the system and how many physical ounces there are on Earth. Yeah, and I've heard 50,000 before too, and I don't know. That seems like I mean, is that before or after the quantitative easing or tightening that takes place? I mean, All right. That's why lumber and firewood have value, because they require work to produce it, and I do cut and sell firewood. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, firewood is a pretty decent business around here. I mean, in my area, they still have a lot of wood burning stoves. It's an old area. I mean, Astoria is like a 200-year-old city. So there's a lot of old homes around here that still use wood burning stoves, and yeah, firewood is a very big business. All right. Skills, equipment, fuel, trees, ability, want. Lumber isn't for everyone. Yeah. But really, is that a beer? No, it's not a beer, bro. It's like kombucha. It's tea. It's fermented tea. All right. That's the greatest thing about capitalism. It's worth what two parties decide it's worth. Yeah, absolutely. You can't afford my hours worth of work then, Johnny. Okay. Is some If something kills lots and working class people, it's worth a lot of money. Hmm. What are you trying to say there? Platinum. I'm thinking it's platinum, for instance, worth a lot because it can kill lots of people. Oh. All right, don't worry. The metals will reflect this inflation sooner or later. Just has to be managed so the headlines don't catch traction. Gold versus palladium versus platinum. Again, when I look at those ones, I really, to me, it comes down to how liquid is the item. One might go up dramatically more than the other, but what if you have a hard time selling it? That's the problem that I would have, is like the moment that you're like, oh man, I want to get out of this thing. If it's a planned event, no, I'm planning on selling it at this price and I got the guy that I know I'm going to sell it to and all that, then, yeah, take your, whatever one you think is going to go up in price. But if you're buying it for survival purposes or protection purposes and stuff like that, silver, by far. I mean, silver's more liquid than gold, in my opinion, because it's a smaller amount that you can, trade. A lot of times, if you have a big chunk of gold, you got to find somebody who's going to give you something, either a lot of money or something that's worth a lot for it. So, again, I think about the liquidity of it. Most people don't have any gold. I agree. Most people don't have any gold. I know a few people who have some silver, but I hardly know anybody who has gone out and purchased gold bullion. All right. A few people. Most of the time when somebody says they have gold, it's usually in the form of jewelry. All right. Let's see here. Or the sense to invest in anything. All right. Get yourself some USA-made tools for assets. Yeah. Being debt-free is just as valuable as gold and silver. It's insurance. Yeah. Well, I definitely agree with that. It's not just a matter of being out of debt because once your income starts to turn down, it's just ever increasingly more frustrating to try and deal with your debt burdens. Right. So being out of debt at least alleviates that, right? So you don't have this debt burden coming down on you if you happen to lose your income. But what's even greater than that is being out of debt changes the way you feel and think. Straight up, I have been in debt pretty much my entire life. And there was a moment there for, I don't know, maybe a year that I was debt-free, completely debt-free, had no debt whatsoever, no credit card, no house, no car, no nothing. There was no debts in my life whatsoever. It was 100% assets. And that was by far the most liberating feeling that I have ever had in my entire life, is to be 100% debt-free. And the day that I did that I went down and I paid off my credit card, like I said, I did a video and I posted it here on YouTube, when I did it. I went down, it was $3,000 that I had finally accumulated to go down and pay off my debt. And I said, once I had the cash to do it, that's exactly what I was going to do. And I paid off that credit card, and I kid you not, like the next week I'm walking around and I felt high. Like I hadn't done anything. I just felt like incredibly good about everything. Like everything. The view that I had looked brighter. The sounds, the music that I was listening to, it just sounded better. The coffee, like it smelled better. Everything was so much better in my life. And I was just thinking, man, was debt burden that much of a mental like downer that it does that to you? Like you can't enjoy the things that are out there in your life because you're in debt. And I really believe that's the case for a lot of people because I experienced that myself. So being out of debt is not only like, great because you don't have to worry about like, coming up with the money to pay your debts, but it relieves something in your head of the stress, of the mental deterioration from being in debt or something. It's well worth it. Simon, what is your thoughts on buying TLT? I don't know. I don't know. I guess I would have to think about that one for a bit. What is TLT anyway? Having tools always gives you access to employment. What about crypto? Again, like, I look at cryptocurrencies as something that has like a really good idea behind it. But as far as like any kind of faith of like doing well, I don't really see that. Like, I mean, I buy Bitcoin, but I don't really anticipate Bitcoin doing anything for me other than just having it. So it's a lot of money to put towards something just to have. So I guess I do have some kind of belief that it's going to exist into the future, that people would want to participate in it. But as far as like being something that is going to be like the change that everybody is looking for, like Bitcoin is all of a sudden going to be the medium of exchange or something like that, I don't really see that happening. Not yet anyway. Quality tools are available for sure. All right. Suffering caused by implementing gold standard and suffering caused by current system is one of them. Possibly substantially worse than the other. Okay. Yeah. Right. I mean, whatever one is going to take you to poverty faster. Right. So, I mean, no. I mean, I guess there's probably no which one's worse or better. I don't know. Like, I think that's more about the condition in which that you have put yourself in. If you're on a gold standard, you will eventually fall. The most industrious nation will bring in all the money. They will raise their standard of living. They will export their manufacturing, importing domestic products. That in turn will then eventually deprive the country of money, and everybody falls into poverty. So how do you want that to exist, right? I mean, here the United States should have fallen into poverty like back in the 70s when they finally, defaulted on the dollar, when it was, when Nixon basically severed the gold standard. That's when like the United States should have fallen into poverty, right? Due to, Cantillon effect and all that. But the paper currency kept getting issued, and a lot of people took advantage of that, right? Not only just here in the United States, but a lot of people around the world, who jumped on that bandwagon. I mean, Saudi Arabia, right? I mean, selling all their oil for dollars, gave them a huge advantage over the rest of the world, right? Now all of a sudden they have this huge standard of living that came with it too. So is one better or worse than the other? Sure. I mean, I guess it depends on how you positioned yourself. Like if you, position yourself heavily into gold and you're an industrious nation, then that would be better. But if you're here in the United States and you're just a regular working class dude trying to figure out how it is that you're going to be making it in this world, well, the United States has a pretty easy way of making a living. Like, I mean, you don't really have to have any kind of really special skills or talent, to make it here. Now, if you want to make it good, then you do have to put in a lot of effort, but you don't have to put in a lot of effort to actually make it, right? I mean, I've seen the way like people just show up for their jobs. I mean, they just barely show up and they're barely there at all, but yet they still get paid, you know? I mean, they mentally checked out a long time ago. And they can still, you know, manage to function and get an apartment and drive a car around and stuff like that. So making it in this country isn't hard. It's just hard to make it good, you know? And so I don't know, how do you want to position yourself? That would be probably the better question to ask. All right. Wait until after 11 p.m. to get the best bar prices. All right. What's the most amount of money you have ever had? I mean, at any one shot, not a whole lot. Yeah. All right. If you don't hold it in your hands, you don't own it. That's what I think about crypto. Well, I mean that's true, but I mean if you understand how the protocol works, you know, and you understand the private keys, and you have at least some faith in the program itself. I mean, it's never like Bitcoin has never failed. I mean, it's never failed to provide a transaction. There's exchanges that have failed. There have been people who have been ripped off. There's all kinds of issues that have come up with Bitcoin as far as what happened to people when they messed around with it. But the actual Bitcoin distributed ledger protocol, that still functions just the same as it always has, and there's no change to that. So to me, I have faith in the in you know, in the Bitcoin itself, right? As far as being able to continue on doing what it's doing, and that's like, you know, providing transactions. So I have faith in that, like, you know, that'll work. Not necessarily that the internet will stay up, or that, you know, electricity will continue to run, or that I'll be able to, like, you know, at any given time be able to do a transaction. That part I don't necessarily have faith in, you know. So, you know, but cryptos, I mean, like Bitcoin, some of the other currencies, you know, the cryptocurrencies out there, you know, they're pretty safe and, you know, anonymous and stuff like that. So there's some good ideas behind it, but again, like, you know, I mean, I personally wouldn't go all in on cryptocurrencies. All right, semiconductor metals. If Taiwan doesn't sell out China, Johnny with the personal questions tonight. Yeah, nonsense. Just get smaller gold pieces. Silver is for brokies. Whatever. All right, best tips at the come better 11. Okay. Is there a flight to safety? I assume this is bonds. Then why have rates been rising with higher demand? Is this because they have to issue so many due to debts? Trying to understand the mechanics. So there's a lot of reasonings that people will probably throw out there as far as, you know, what's going on with the bond yields and the prices and stuff like that. We have to understand, like, the Federal Reserve, when they went into quantitative easing, everybody knew it. Everybody knew that the Federal Reserve was going to be printing up money and buying bonds and mortgage-backed securities. When everybody knows that the Federal Reserve is going to do this, they all try to front-run the Fed, right? So if they can buy this up before the Federal Reserve jumps into it, when the yields go down and the bond prices, because when the yields go down, bond prices go up. When yields go up, bond prices go down. So when people were anticipating the Federal Reserve was jumping into the quantitative easing game by buying up bonds, that was going to lower the yields and drive the prices up. They tried to front run the Fed, right? So they jumped in on that bond market thinking that if the yields continue to rise, they would be able to sell those bonds off for a profit. They were speculating. How much speculation do you think was in the bond market that drove those yields down, right? A lot. Considering the special purpose vehicle that was set up to buy corporate debt, the corporate debt lending facility, that drove an insane amount of people into corporate debt. The Federal Reserve never even, well, they did buy a little bit to establish the credible threat of it, but really the Federal Reserve didn't buy much at all. It was the market's belief that the Federal Reserve was going to be buying corporate debt, driving the yields down and the prices up. They started buying up this corporate debt, and that's exactly what ended up happening, but they didn't need the Federal Reserve to do it. They did it all on their own, right? Well, now everybody's backing out of the market, right? They're like, man, the Fed is unloading their balance sheet. We're not going to be here for it, whatever. And we can't speculate in the market thinking that we'd be able to, you know, front run the Federal Reserve. Well, now you have a lot of people who are backing out of the market, right? But that's not the only thing that's happening, right? Because you can find, and I see a lot of times, I will find articles on this too, And I think people are misunderstanding what's happening here. And that is when you find articles of, say, like, a particular nation is dumping their bond market, getting out of the US dollar. And they'll show like maybe like the country's balance or something like that. And they'll show how it's like all these bonds have diminished off their balance sheets, or, how they've, gotten out of a lot of their US dollars. I don't believe that's them making the conscious decision to get out of the dollar or to sell out of the US bonds. I believe that is them burning through cash, right? There is a liquidity tightening taking place right now. And as they are trying to, continue on buying food and medicines, like, Sri Lanka and Argentina and everybody else out there, as they're trying to do this, they are burning through their cash, right? And what's the easiest way to get cash? You sell treasuries, right? So you sell treasuries, you get the cash, you buy up these products with it, and this is showing the diminishing of cash or US dollars and bonds within these foreign nations, but it's not because they're trying to get out of it, it's because they needed the money, right? They burned through that money on it. And that's where I see, like, a lot of times, I think it's a misunderstanding that people have when they see like the bond reductions or the US debt reduction from these foreign nations. That I don't believe that's them trying to get out of the dollar. I believe that's them just burning through dollars. So they are getting out of it in a way, but not intentionally. And in some ways they might say it's intentional just to keep their citizens, confident in them, in what they're doing or something. But yeah, that's really what I feel is taking place, is that there's a lot of demand for dollars, for cash right now. There's a cash shortage taking place all throughout the rest of the world, and what's the easiest way to get cash, right? Sell bonds. Silver is like pennies compared to dollars. Johnny. Okay, here we go. Hello, my friend. How are you? Hello, Rainier Winkler. How you been? All right. There are reports that Russia is paying for arms sales with gold. How does the movement of gold to China and other countries affect gold pricing globally? I don't know. Is that the truth? I mean, is that really what's happening? I think it would probably be more concerned about I guess if you hide those gold purchases and eventually, somebody accumulates a bunch of gold and then starts dumping that gold out onto the market, then that would start messing with the gold, the gold prices some. But it sounds to me like that's kind of like a speculation that is happening. I don't know. All right. And besides, I think about it. Russia paying for arms with gold. I mean, eventually they're going to run out of gold. Right, they're fighting a war. Like, if you bought some armament with gold and saying, hey, I bought $1 million worth of armament with gold, that would be one thing. But to say, like, we don't have any other cash, we're going to use our gold to buy armament, you're going to run out of gold. You're going to end up in poverty. Potassium is the biggest export product to Kazakhstan. I've learned that from a movie. Do you think China can use this influx of gold as a backstop for their falling yuan? Well, sure. I mean, you can sell gold off there and then, strengthen up your yuan by getting rid of the gold. I mean, that's a possibility. They do it with foreign currencies all the time, or buying foreign currencies to shore it up, depending on how it's looked. But yeah, I mean, sure, you can sell off gold to do that. Silver will be your barter equalizer. Bro, Weaver, I don't think it's less expensive than fast-growing 2x4s and less expensive wins. Don't short the like button. All right. I'm not going to read Johnny's stuff. He's just messing with us. All right. A barter economy would not use gold. The reason we started using gold was to get away from the barter economy. Well, yeah, but what did they do when there wasn't enough gold? Right? I mean, there was some areas that didn't have enough gold. Like, their gold just isn't here. Now what do you do? How do you conduct commerce? Right? You got to find another medium of exchange. That's how come they use silver and even copper and even iron. Like, they used iron coins at one time. In fact, Cantillon talks about it, how in the Romans they were using iron because they couldn't find enough. They didn't have enough currency to do commerce, so they were doing like these steel coins. And they found that people were taking the money and making stuff with it. Like they were using the steel to make other items. And so they took vinegar and I guess messed up the coins so they couldn't be used. Like, I don't know how vinegar destroys steel, but anyway. So they used this vinegar to mess up the coins so that they couldn't be used for anything else except for money. And then foreign nations, like, they're like, well, shit, we got iron deposits, you know, we'll just stamp out some coins that look just like yours. And then they started taking those coins into Rome and started spending them there. And that was, you know, created even more problems with, you know, inflationary type scenarios. So yeah, it's like, it's more of a matter of figuring out a medium of exchange. It doesn't really need to be gold. It can be anything out there. It's just that the reason why gold was the number one choice is because it's recognizable. It's, you know, it doesn't rot. It's, you know, its purity can be, you know, determined, I guess. Well, I mean, maybe not back in the day, but it can be now. You know, so these are the reasons why gold ends up holding on to its, you know, onto its monetary status, is because there's really nothing out there like it, right? Except for now with the cryptocurrencies. But then again, like if you got rid of computers, you wouldn't have currency. You would still have gold, right? If all the electricity disappeared, you know. Bong hit will give the same feeling. All right. Johnny. Here we go. Would you say that debt to buy a house is fine, but going into debt to buy consumer products, including cars, is what mentally drains an individual and causes depression and anxiety? Yeah, I mean, well, depression and anxiety and all that other stuff is probably more due to the fact that you have probably other mental issues that are taking place, and that it's coming out in that, right? I mean, that's really probably what's ended up happening. The actual owning of debt, although is very, you know, liberating and feeling, I mean, I don't think it would necessarily, like, for everybody cause a depressionary scenario. Like, I think a lot of people would probably be just fine with their debts. Now, when we think about, hold on one second. When we think about buying a house, to going into debt to buy a house, no, I don't even think that. Like, I don't think using debt to buy a house is a good idea. I think using debt to make money is a good idea. Right? Now, if you happen to buy a house and you live there and fixed it up and improved the house, and over time, you know, it gone up in value, you're able to sell it for a higher price, then that's kind of like an investment that you're doing, right? But just to buy a house and saying, no, I'm cool with this because I need a place to live and I'm going in debt for it, I don't know if that's necessarily the right approach. There's a really great argument out there for being in 100% assets and zero liabilities. And being in zero liabilities means you don't take on a mortgage. Even if you know, think of like, you know, I'm going to fix this house up and sell it for a profit. Taking out like debt to buy a rental income, right? That to me is good debt. That would be a good reason to do it. Now, with that being said, all that, like, I bought my house and I got it at 3% interest. That is a really low interest rate. The chances of me wanting to pay that house off early is pretty low, right? I mean, I believe that there is much better places that you could park money that's going to earn a hell of a lot more beyond the 3% that you would save if you were to pay your house off early, or if I was to pay my house off early. So I look at my house and I think, man, I will never have this thing paid off, right? I mean, it's a 30-year loan and I'm almost 50 years old, right? By the time it's paid off, I probably won't care that much. So, I mean, I will probably never own my own home, right? I mean, when I do, it'll be a long time from now. So at some point in the future, I would think that I probably won't be living there and I will be renting that house out. At that point, it will have turned into an investment. So that is kind of like my plan going into the future for it. But again, at this point right now, you know, no, I don't look at buying a house as a good idea to take out a mortgage to do it. But you're probably not going to own a house unless you do that, right? Most people don't have the cash to do it. So, you know, if you want to own a home, you want to live in a house, then you're going to have to go into debt to do it. All right. All right. The only way to make money is to save up and buy something that you can resell for a profit. Otherwise, your labor produces your income. No, I mean, there's ways that, I mean, you don't have to resell something. Like, I'm a salesman. I mean, I'm all about like buying and selling, right? And that's something that I find very interesting from a lot of people. Is just like, how much money did you make when you sell it? You don't make money when you sell. You make money when you buy, right? That's how you make money. Is you make money on the buy. And so when I think about that, when you buy something and you get a really, really, really good deal on it, right? That's a good way of making money. My buddy, he was a hustler, and that's how he did it. I mean, he would offer, make 100 offers a day to different people for cars or lawnmowers or, firearms or whatever it was. And occasionally he would get a good one, right? He would get these like incredibly good deals, and then he would turn around and sell it. Like right now, you just, because people, you would just offer up a regular price for it, but he got it at a really good deal. So that there's a lot to say about buying something and then turning around and selling it again. But really, if you want to make money, you got to have something that's going to be, passive and perpetual, right? Stuff like rental incomes, dividend paying stocks, these are passive ways of making money. Having a YouTube channel is a fairly passive way of making money. I mean, I have to do effort, to keep it going. I put out the videos. I try to do it on a daily basis. But then once I put the video out there, it's out there, clicking pennies away. And so like having a passive income by far, or passive and perpetual income, is by far the best way to make money, even if it's just a small amount, because earning money while you sleep gives you the ability to leverage your time. And that's important, right? To be able to leverage your time, to put out a little bit of effort to make a video, or even a lot of effort to make a video. But then after you post it, you no more work, right? It's just out there doing its thing. So, keeping those things in mind, that's really, in my opinion, the best way to make money. All right, Uneducated Economist, would you rather deal with me on here or Johnny? What? What do you mean? Just ask some questions. Let's talk. All right, Yui, what happened if the BRICS nations liquidate all their treasuries? I don't know. I mean, well, I don't know. I mean, what happens if they liquidate all their... I mean, there's a lot of what ifs that could happen out there. I mean, what if, what if the BRICS nations all of a sudden decided that they weren't going to use the dollar anymore, like they are trying to say that they're doing? I mean, what happens to the dollar? It's getting stronger right now. So what do we say? It's just like, is it going to crash the dollar and make it worthless, or is it going to cause the dollar to strengthen? If these nations start selling out of U.S. treasuries, who's going to pick up the U.S. treasuries? Right? And then what is it that they're going to use for a safe and liquid asset to back all their currency up with, or back anything that they have going up with? Do they have that available to them? Is there any other nation out there providing a safe and liquid asset like the U.S. Treasury? There really isn't. I mean, are they going to abandon the U.S. treasuries, get rid of those, and then move into gold? There's a lot of what ifs that are in that question. It's very difficult to answer. I mean, you can let your imagination roll, I guess. All right. Hey, Glenn. Evening, Simon. All right. Is it possible those nations are taking that revenue from treasuries to buy gold? I guess everything is possible, right? I mean, sure, it's possible that they could be doing that. I would imagine that if that was the case, then you would see gold prices moving up. I don't really see that happening right now. And then again, a lot of times people are like, man, why would anybody want to hold on to paper when you can hold gold? But gold isn't exactly like the easiest thing to deal with. You got two nations that want to do a deal in gold, right? And it was just like, okay, well, you have the product, I have the gold. I've been storing this gold. I've had to pay security on this gold. I mean, do I get any kind of return for that? And then who's going to pay for the transportation, security, and all that of this gold when I send it over to you? There's cost associated with gold. Well, when you're holding a U.S. Treasury, you're actually getting paid a little bit to hold a U.S. Treasury. Gold doesn't do that for you, right? And so it's a safe and liquid asset. So is U.S. Treasuries, and the U.S. Treasuries pay you, gold costs you, right? All right. Simon, what is your favorite type of silver to stack? Maple leaves, eagles, or bars? I personally, I like the silver eagles. I bought a lot of silver eagles throughout my life, over the last 10 years or so. But if you haven't purchased a whole lot of silver yet, then I would say be in generic bullion to start with until you build up a decent stack, and then move into the government issued stuff. There's a lot to be said about the government issued. It's recognizable. It carries a higher premium to it, so the buy and sell on it is a little bit higher than on the generic. But it doesn't really provide you with anything different than the generic does. It's still an ounce of silver. It's nothing, nothing any more special about it other than the image that has been, stamped into it. There is something to say about the silver eagles, though, and the legal tender of it, right? Because that's another thing that I don't know if a lot of people really kind of consider, is that if you have a silver eagle in your hand, you have something that is a US dollar, right? Now, if you can imagine like all the paper currencies disappearing out there, well, that silver eagle is still a dollar, right? And it doesn't disappear, right? It's like, it's there. So when you think about like maybe the idea of making a purchase and avoiding sales tax kind of thing. So say an item is $200, but you sold it for $10, 10 silver eagles, right? Now, could you legally write that down? And you're not supposed to, but could you legally write that down as I sold it for $10 and pay the taxes on $10, right? Because it is 10 US, it's a legal tender currency of $1, right? Now, legally you're supposed to accept it as $200 if it's the item is 200 or whatever, even if you're trading silver for it. You're supposed to accept it as $200, but if it's legal tender, it's legal tender, right? And who else is to say, yeah, I sold that $200 item for $10, and yeah, I sold it for 10 US dollars, So, there is something to say for having government issue for that kind of little, possibility in it, but that's kind of a little bit far-fetched. All right. Yo, Simon, any changes in the lumber market with new Chicago contracts? To be honest with you, no, I haven't seen anything change within the lumber contract or the lumber market, except that it has become a lot more stable. Like, before the Chicago contracts, we were having some pretty wild swings, even in the daily trades of lumber. And since that Chicago contracts have now been, brought into the market, or now the focus of the futures contracts, it seems that the prices have become a lot more stable. Now, right around 500 to, 520 to 550 per thousand. That's a pretty high price, considering what the lumber prices were, like, say, prior to 2017 or something like that. But when you have that added input cost of the rail transfer from the Pacific Northwest out to Chicago, that adds a lot to the price. So if you were to compare like the futures contract today to what it was years ago, you would have to like take out that added travel cost, that added rail cost going from the Pacific Northwest to Chicago. So the futures price in comparison should be a lot lower, but the volatility has dropped out dramatically. And now this is something that I believe that they were looking for, because really there was only a handful of players in the lumber market anyway. There were 110,000 board foot contracts. They were huge, right? There was this massive contracts that people had to buy and sell out of. Now the contracts are a quarter of the size, so it's like a semi-truck load worth, as opposed to like an entire train rail or train car load. So when you have a semi-truck load, well, this is something that, like players like, even lumber yards, the big time builders, distributors, wholesalers, a lot more people can now play in this market, because, the contracts are a quarter of the size. So what is it, 25,000, a little over 25,000 board feet. So this is a lot easier for people to buy and sell out of. With all this new speculation in the market, which you would think would be like bad for the market, was actually good. It actually stabilized prices because now you have more players in the game and you don't have just a handful of people who are the buyers and sellers in it. So I guess if that's kind of like the information you might be looking for, that's really the only thing I have. I mean, there is still some shortages that are taking place within the market. I mean, it's not like major shortages, but like some of the 2x12, the wider lumber, like 12s, 14s, 16s, those things were very difficult to source out. And so there's a bit of a shortage of those. And I'm not saying like it's a major shortage, like everybody has to throw their arms in the air and get all crazy about. It's not like that. Like those units are out there. They just need to be found and put into into the distribution to our location. It's just a little difficult to find them right now. So before, when there was like lumber shortages, like we would like, hey man, where's the lumber? Like it was nowhere to be found. Like it was like people are like, we don't know when we're getting it, we don't know where it's at. Like it is nowhere to be found. That's not the case right now with lumber. There's lumber out there. It's just very sluggish going through the system, and a lot of that is due to the mill curtailments. I mean, the mill curtailments are still so significant that the pellet companies, so wood burning pellets, this is another product that we sell here at the store, just for heating your home, wood fuel pellets. So the company that we get them from has already given us warning, basically saying, hey, we got like this much supply right now. We're about ready to head into winter, and really this is not a significant amount. This is still fairly small as far as their inventory level goes. One of the major problems is the bagging, sorting, all that other machinery that they have. But on top of that, they have input product, right? The pulp from the mills. That's their product that they need. The byproduct coming from the mill is their main product for making the pellets. Well, the mill curtailments are so significant right now that they are having difficulty sourcing out that byproduct, that pulp. So if this continues and we go into winter, well, then they may find that they have to slow production down just for the simple fact that they cannot get the byproduct coming from the mills because there's less mill production taking place. So, this is all still happening. I mean, this was occurring last year too, so it's still not nearly as significant or severe as it was, but it's still the case right now. All right. Kinross Gold KGC operating a mine in Russia just stole it from them for 50 cents on the dollar. However, you must have mining equipment to keep the mine working. How bad can the dollar shortage get? Can treasuries and or the Fed buy bonds fast enough to avoid the meltdown? That is actually something that I have said in the past. Sometimes I wonder when we start running into a liquidity crisis if the Federal Reserve could even print at a pace that is fast enough to cover all the debts that are due in dollars. That is a very good question. I really don't know. Yeah. And I think that's one of the major issues coming from the Federal Reserve. They're like, damn, we do not want this much demand for our liabilities. Man, would somebody put out some BRICS propaganda out there and start, getting people to start using some other kind of currency for liquidity so that we don't have to provide so many damn dollars, right? Because this is getting hard, right? The U.S. unsustainable debt is going to crash the entire system. We cannot possibly keep buying U.S. treasuries in order to provide the world with liquidity, right? I mean, this is kind of what's happening, right? I mean, the Federal Reserve has to buy the U.S. treasuries. They get the dollars out there. They distribute the dollars out to the rest of the world. And that's the liquidity that the world is demanding. If they can't find that, they're going to find another currency to work with. And that's where I believe the BRICS nations are really stepping up to say, hey, man, we hate the dollar or whatever, but I don't think they really hate the dollar. I think they really like the dollar and what it does, but they have no access to these dollars, and they don't really want to admit that, they have a lack of liquidity, so they just use their own sovereign currencies. All right, there's productive debt and destructive debt. Knowing the difference is crucial. Yeah, and exactly it. See, like that's the way I feel like about my house. It's like kind of destructive debt until the point that I move out and start renting it or something. Then it'll be productive debt. All right. but you need transportation in North America. Buy good used. I pay cash for my property. Yeah, one of your very few can do that. Buy high, sell low, make money. Buy low, sell high. All right, what's going to happen when student loans resume? I don't know. People keep asking me about that, and I'm just wondering if anybody's actually going to pay it. Yeah. I mean, if nobody pays, then how do you go after everybody, right? I mean, you can go after them, slowly start filtering through them all, but people could probably go for years and years and years and years without ever paying any debt before anybody ever comes to them. I don't know. I mean, they're supposed to start paying it what now? Isn't it like started this month that they were supposed to start paying it back? So let's see what happens. I mean, I'm thinking that is probably not going to be as significant as a lot of people are anticipating it. It's not like they didn't know this was coming, right? So is it going to create some hardships? Probably. But is it going to be so significant that it's actually going to impact the economy in a way that is noticeable? I don't know. I mean, I don't think so. How important will personal credit be worth as physical worth versus physical assets? That's an interesting one. Well, I think the personal credit would be important if you plan on taking out debts, right? But if you don't plan on taking out debts, then, it's going to be all about assets. Gold is the opt-out of traditional paper currency. All right. The extra transportation cost to the lumber is working its way through the snake, I'm sure. Yeah, and it was pretty interesting. Like I was expecting like a lot bigger change to the lumber market. Like I thought there was going to be a pretty significant change that would happen from it. But I don't know if you guys remember when I was talking with Keta from Madison's Lumber Reporter, and I asked her what she thought was going to happen, and she assumed that it was going to stabilize the market and bring some more equilibrium to the prices, and I believe that she was absolutely correct on that. So, but she's really into that. I don't know if you guys remember Keta, from some of the interviews I've done, but that lady is so smart when it comes to lumber. All right. Let's see here. Did Trump tour chemtrail plane? What? All right. Rail rates to Chicago are keeping steady. Harvest this fall will increase rail rates. Bro, you are announcing to the entire world that you do not understand chemistry. It's wild. It's not protection. It won't work. I bought forest land and cut it down. GMA, can you give me cut rough planks in Wisconsin? The Amero is coming. The Amero. Thanks for the lumber update. Yeah, you're welcome there, Crypto Crandall. Yeah, I wish I could give you some more exciting news, that there's really not a whole lot going out there that that is going to be exciting. I mean, it was when lumber was doing its thing and I was finding shortages and I was like, seeing all these changes and crazy, events happening prior to anybody else, man, it made the channel a lot funner to watch because I was able to call out these things long ahead of time, as far as the lumber reports go. But lumber is a really boring commodity. It doesn't do anything. It just it hardly moves anywhere and it doesn't really have any kind of, excitement to it. The only reason why I was so excited is because it was running up so damn high, due to the shortages. But I have rough sawn cedar and walnut from Arkansas. Made a nice bench out of the cedar. Right on. All-nighter, I have some cedar, but love it. Student loans, ATR, 40% of U.S. assets. Yeah, and now on the balance sheet, let me get this right here. I may be wrong on this, but on the balance sheet of the assets, right, the student loan part of it makes up 40% of the financial portion of the balance sheet, right? So like the balance sheet has all kinds of assets on it. The financial portion of that balance sheet, isn't it 40% of that? So it's not like 40% of the entire balance sheet. from what I understand. It's just 40% of the financial portion of the balance sheet, which might be pretty significant, but I don't think it's 40% of the entire balance sheet, but I could be wrong. Yeah. And I love what they refer to them as, slabs, student loan asset-backed securities. Isn't that great? What a great name. All right. It really makes tiny houses smell great. Yep, in moth-free. Okay, gold and silver are stuff hitting the fan currencies. When nobody trusts fiat currencies, precious metals, cryptos, and bartering comes in the economy. I'm just kind of curious. Outside of like hearing, like, I mean, I totally get that. But over the last, like, say, 100 years, has there ever been a time here in the United States that happened? Right? That people started moving back to, like, gold and silver? See, I mean, I believe that when the stuff hits the fan, that you are going to find that a lot of people are going to be able to protect themselves with the gold and silver that they have, but I don't feel that there's going to be transactions occurring with that. Like, I think as the stuff hits the fan, that stuff is going to get hoarded and locked away, and the people who do give it up will be giving it up out of desperation. Right? That's really how I think it's going to end up going down. The Air Force One plane should be a gunner. Student loans that have to be paid, ain't that gonna pressure on the consumer market? I don't know. Maybe that was part of the timing of it. You know, they've been trying to restrict the consumer anyway. Maybe it was just like, well, if we can't hit them with any higher interest rates, maybe we'll hit them back with student loan payments or something, or payback. Or, you know. Okay, if you don't pay your school loans, it will prevent you from buying a home. I know this. Oh, bummer. Crude rising will prop up the markets. Lots of programs to reduce student loan payments. Oh, was that the last comment? Oh, very well. College administrations at all-time highs. Well, awesome. We've gone through most of the comments here. That was cool. This was a fun stream to do tonight. Well, we got an hour and 21 minutes into it, 107 people watching, 102 likes. That was pretty cool. Thank you very much for hitting that like button. Thanks for those recent videos regarding the dollar liquidity. I haven't been reading the articles you have recommended on the vids and trying to wrap my head around it. And thanks for answering my questions. Yeah, you bet there, Jersey 2626. You know, I like that little series that I did there this week. You know, because really, I found that as I started reading through more and more articles, I started finding like a lot of these articles, if you follow like, or if you understand like Cantillon effect, Triffin's dilemma, Gresham's law, and the bullwhip effect, and you start reading through a lot of these articles, these news articles, you're going to find that there's a combination of either one or many of these things occurring within this article when you're reading it. Like, you know, it's just like, man, they're describing Cantillon, or they're describing, you know, Triffin's dilemma or Gresham's law or something that is happening. Or when you read it and somebody says this is what's going to take place, you know, as the BRICS nations move into whatever, it's going to start, you know, dethroning the dollar or whatever. Well, then you can take into consideration, it's just like, well, what about Gresham's law and Triffin's dilemma? Like, how does this currency get out to the world? And then what happens when you have two currencies working side by side and you have a good one and a bad one? What occurs then? So when you kind of understand what these things are, or these economic theories, and you start reading some of these news articles, you can see that a lot of these economists out there who write these articles don't necessarily take these other economic forces into consideration. They take the current situation that they see the evidence of it, and then they come to their own conclusions from that. Like, you know, very much like Argentina, you know, getting out of the dollar. That's not the truth. Like, Argentina loves the dollar. They want dollars. They have a shortage of dollars, and because they have a shortage of dollars, they have to start doing transactions in yuan. And so when you see these articles come out like Whirlpool is even doing transactions in yuan out of Argentina, it's because they have a shortage of dollars taking place there. And if you read the article that doesn't mention that, then you wouldn't believe it, right? Or if you maybe just aren't aware of like, Gresham's law or Triffin's dilemma, then you might like misunderstand what is taking place there. Is that, you might say, wow, Argentina really wants to start using yuan and get out of the dollar. That's not the case, right? But articles can be written in such fashions, right? So that's really how, like, gosh, I'm kind of stumbling over my words here, but if you follow those particular economic theories, those four, right? The bullwhip effect, Cantillon, Triffin's dilemma, and Gresham's law, it really answers a lot of stuff, right? It's not the answers for everything that's going on in the economy, but it really makes a lot more sense to look at those particular theories when you're reading these articles. Like I said, I noticed like over the last, few weeks, as I started incorporating these particular theories into the articles, when I would read them, saying, do I see these particular theories out, occurring here in this article? It's just being misunderstood, or maybe being, described in a way that isn't exactly like, hey, this is, Triffin's dilemma happening or something like that. All right. Hi, Yui. Do you think material shortages at local stores, but you can find what you need online, will make people more used to online, which makes corporations bigger and small businesses suffer more? Okay. So I think about this. So there's some brackets that I use. So everybody who does new construction or framing knows that there's a particular company out there that makes connecting brackets, right? You want to connect two different types or two boards together. They make these little metal brackets. They make all kinds of them. There's one particular company out there that is really, really, really well known for it. Now, something very interesting has happened with this particular company, and that is that I used to have vendors that I could buy these brackets from, right? These vendors would come to me twice a week, right? There was 3 or 4 of them I could call. So, somebody calls up, asking me, hey, do you have this particular bracket? If I don't carry it in the store, I can call up my vendors, see if one of those guys have it. They'll deliver it to me, on their next truck. Just recently, all those vendors were wiped clean of their inventory. They have no more of these brackets. This particular company has gone in and taken all the inventory out. So I can't call a vendor for these brackets anymore. Instead, what I do is I go to a portal on my computer and I order the brackets through a portal, and then they get shipped to me UPS. Right? I thought about this. I was just like, why am I here? Like, I don't need to be the one clicking the buttons on this portal. The customer could essentially do that, right? So all of a sudden, these brackets, which I still sell, right, through my store and everything, are coming into a position in which vendors no longer aren't touching them, right? So they don't get to make money off of this. The wholesaler, like wherever the warehouse is, UPS, or whoever's shipping them, and myself, right? We're the ones who are making money. We cut out all the middlemen out of it, right? Hopefully save money. Now, there's an issue with me on this. Like, I'm just going to give you the whole story so you can kind of understand it, is that I'm limited on how much that I can purchase before I have to pay a shipping cost. Right? So if I don't achieve a particular minimum, then I have to pay the UPS on it, which in turn the customer has to pay the UPS. Well, the customer doesn't want to pay the UPS on it, right? Nobody wants to pay this. They want it, without the shipping, like I used to get when I would order from my vendors. So now we got to achieve this minimum, which means I got to find all kinds of stock that I need to order in order to get this one bracket in. Well, you do that once or twice a week, and pretty soon now you're loaded up on stock. You're going to have a difficult time bringing in a special order bracket for somebody. So now what I feel is going to happen from this is that it's going to be very discouraging using this particular company to purchase these brackets. But since they're really the only one in the game, I have no other choice. But it doesn't mean that they have to be the only one in the game. There are other companies out there who can make these particular brackets. And if they came into a position in which that they didn't overinvest or trying to cut, expenses or whatever, or cut out the middleman, cut out the vendors, if they are in a position in which that they can bring the product cheaper through the distribution network and be more convenient for me to order, well, then I'm going to move over to another company to do it. They're not there yet, but the opportunity now exists. You see what's happening here? So how these changes are now taking place and what the outcome from it will be, I don't know. All right. But it just seems to me that this has now opened up the opportunity for another company to now step in and be a provider of convenience. Because that's really what it comes down to, is how convenient is it to get these brackets. And if they can provide a more convenient way of getting it, even if the price is comparable, the convenience is there for me to now use them as opposed to the company that I have to go through a portal to use, right? Just see what's kind of happening here? And I'm finding this on a lot of stuff, right? I mean, what else is that way? There's a lot of hardware that gets ordered through portals. Like before, I used to call people up and it was like, hey man, do you have any of this particular hardware in stock? And then they would go through their inventory. And now, like, I have access to their inventory. Like, people have access to my inventory in my store. Like, they can order online right from a website and, come and pick it up at the store. Like, they can see my inventory there and make the purchases that way. So it's coming to the point where it's just like, it's going to be very convenient just to go to your computer and type a few keys. You don't really need to talk to a salesperson anymore, right? And that's what's happening. It's like, I feel like my job and a lot of other jobs like mine are going to get eliminated out there, because what do you need? You don't need me to punch the numbers on the computer, right? You need me to, like, tell you what the products are, how they work, whether or not there's a good one or bad one out there. These are the, to actually sell the product. That's what you need me for. You don't need me to, like, go and punch buttons into a computer. Thanks, dude. Hey, I got a super chat. Let's go check that out. Oh, thank you very much. P5Ks palms. All right, for the SGD5. I wonder what that is. Russia selling gold won't affect gold prices because it's traded without exposure like dark pools. Thank you for your 4 economic theories and importance of buying gold. Well, thank you very much for the super chat. I really appreciate the support, man. That's very cool of you. What bracket is that? I want more info. All you have to do is, like, you can find it. It's the biggest company out there right now who sells construction brackets. And I mean, somebody's probably already mentioned it here in the, I just don't want to, I don't really like throwing out names out there, brand names and stuff like that. I mean, just because I just don't want to advertise for these companies or, throw attention in directions that, in directions like that. So anyway, but the brackets are really, like, this is the most popular company out there that makes them. But I think about that a lot, like how this distribution network has changed, how sales have changed dramatically, It's amazing on how many online purchases that are made now. Like, we get inventory into our store, it shows up in our stock, and it was just like, oh man, where did this come from? And you go and you look at all the online purchases, and people are literally, like, ordering stuff and it shows up in our stock. We don't really have anything to do with it. It's just like, it just shows up when we got the paperwork. Hey, call these people and let them know their stuff is in. It's kind of cool too, All right. I work in flooring, cabinets, retail. Literally 3 customers came in last month asking if I'm a wholesaler. They were looking for the source to buy from. Importers started selling to public, cutting middlemen. Yeah, and see, that's another thing that I'm finding is that I do deal with some vendors who will sell directly to the contractors, but I'm pretty much of the game that if you are selling to the same people that I'm selling to, then I will not do business with you. Like, I just straight up, unless you give me, like, a much, much better price, something that I can compete with. But yeah, there's like there's some games out there that are very difficult to play. Like the roofing is very, very hard to be profitable at. distributing roofing, unless you are buying truckloads of it. If you buy a truckload of it, it's cool. But if you're just trying to stock a few pallets so that you can have it on hand for your customers, it is almost impossible to make money at roofing, because the way it's distributed, it big time roofing contractors can go straight to the buyer, straight to the wholesalers, and buy for essentially what I'm paying for it. So I can't cut them a deal. Like, there's nothing I can do to try and make any money at it, so I don't even offer it, right? Now, when it's a smaller, just maybe a small house, or, woodshed or something like that, well, then those things, yeah, that's easy to compete with, right? But if you're going up against somebody who's like bidding out, 100 square, 15 jobs with 100 squares on each job or something like that, it's almost impossible to compete against, some of the bigger outfits out there, because they're going to distribute it at the same price that they're going to sell it to me for, to my customer. So it's just like, I don't even try. Yeah. All right. Kind of like pumping your own gas, That's so funny. I've only pumped gas just a few times in my entire life. In Oregon, it was illegal to pump your own gas for years. Only just recently did they pass it so that you can legally pump your own gas. Isn't that crazy? Oregon it was illegal to pump your own gas. All right. Is oil and natural gas, which just bought another 4,000 acres and paid cash, which has no debt with plenty of cash and 8 to 14 new wells, and read 8,000 and 8K and book value went up. All right. Don't agree with you there, my friend. Sales will always be needed. Oh no, I agree. Like, I'm a salesman and I will find something out there to sell. Like, I'm good at it, right? But what I'm saying is like, a lot of the products that I buy that people would call me up saying, hey, do you have access to this kind of thing? They don't need me anymore. Like, I need a particular bracket. Yes, there is one there, right? I mean, it's just like, do you really need me to punch into the computer and tell you that one is available when you can do that yourself? That's the part that I'm talking about. When it comes to selling, like, somebody comes in and says, I'm interested in composite decking. What's composite decking? Well, man, let's go for it, man. I mean, I'm good at that. Let me show you all the different types of decking that are available and give you my thoughts about them or whatever. That game, yeah, that's going to always be there, and you're right about that. But there's a lot of products out there that they don't need me for anymore, All right, stomping out costs, push inflation. All right. Oh, Singapore dollar. I see. Right on. Do you still do podcasts? Yeah, I know. Yeah. Okay. So, because I have a full-time job and a family and the YouTube channel, I have an assistant who is helping me with the channel, but she moved away and she moved to the East Coast. And although she is very awesome and very hardworking and a excellent person, she has her own life and she's trying to go to school and do her own thing and going on with that. And I've kind of lost a lot of communication, the regular communication with her. I've had my own things kind of going on. So without making up a bunch of excuses, I just backed away on a lot of the things that I was doing for the channel, just to try and like regroup, I guess, myself, to figure out what it is that I need to do. So I will fire the podcast back up again. Not sure exactly when, but once I do fire it back up, it's going to be consistent and it will stay forever. Like, that's what I will do, and I will not be like, a hit and miss or something like that. It will be very consistent. So I just need to reestablish that again and get it moving, because I know a lot of people would rather listen to the audio of these videos as opposed to watching them on YouTube, and the podcast was a great way of going about that. So I know I know a lot of you really enjoyed those, so I'm gonna bring that back. All right. Okay. Matt, can you tell me why CP? Okay. I just installed some Pebble Gray yesterday. Oh, right on. Very cool. All nighter. I wonder if Chris Irons saw our comments on his last podcast. All right. Well, guys, this has been a lot of fun. I enjoy hanging out with you as always. I'm going to head out. It's been about an hour and 40 minutes into this podcast, 113 people watching, 117 thumbs up. Thank you so much for liking the video. I can never thank you enough for being part of this channel. It's changed my life, you know that. And I really appreciate everything that everybody has ever done for me. Uneducated Economist. You guys let me know.